So can you are you comfortable telling me who you are and where you're from?
Yeah, I'm my name's Teddy Bobrowski and I live in Thunder Bay, Ontario.
Now I
And
understand you an injured worker. Could you tell us about how you got injured?
I certainly can. I've been an injured worker now for 33 years. I hurt myself originally in 1990 when they were doing a big expansion at the mill here, and I was hired as a laborer. And the day that I hurt myself, um, I had a ongoing problem with the foreman who was asking me to come in early to work because where our punch clock was and where our lunch shack was, where everybody met up after we got to the job and our jobs were handed out from there, was about a 15-minute walk from where we punched in. So I would, uh, I had a lot on the go in my life, and I had a hard time, coming into work early, especially with no extra pay. So I would a lot of times make it to work just on time. But he wanted me 15 minutes early so that when he handed out the jobs, uh, everybody was there in the lunchroom, and a lot of times I wasn't. Um, so he got angry with me and told me that I needed to do this, and so we didn't get off to a good start that day. Later on that day, I was working inside the mill, and we were backfilling around concrete bases. These are heavy concrete bases, about 3 feet thick, that were poured for heavy machinery. Now there's a hollow space, like a ditch, all the way around these concrete bases, and our job was to backfill all the refill all the dirt around the concrete. And we had an operator on a backhoe, not a backhoe, a bobcat or skid steer that was doing the work, but he, to my knowledge, was impaired and was showing off operating the skid steer. So we had cleared a way for him to get in and do the backfilling so we could stay out of the way, and then all we had to do was go down afterwards and pack it around the bases so nobody would get hurt. Everybody was staying clear. The foreman came into the mill and saw that what we were doing, and he was fine. Everything was fine. He was talking to us. There wasn't a problem until some supervisors, white hats we call them, came walking through the mill. Immediately, it was like he got hit with a cattle prod and decided that we had to look busy. So it was there was a bunch of iron workers material beside the one of the ditches we were backfilling, and if we moved all that material, the operator would have a second way to get in and do the backfilling. Not something that we needed, but it would make us look busy while these supervisors were coming through the mill. So he asked us to move the material, and I told him it wasn't our material, it was ironworkers' material. And right away, he jumped down my throat and said, I don't give a shit whose effing material it is. You move this goddamn shit right now. And so I just was going to go over and lift one of the steel girders to judge the weight. And I knew they were heavy. So I was going to figure, well, we're not going to move these by hand. We're going to have to get the operator in here with the skid steer and sling these steel girders and get them out of here, that way. It was a lot more work. It was totally unnecessary, and but it was to satisfy him. So, unbeknownst to me, I'm standing on the edge of the dirt, right in front of these steel girders, with my back to the ditch and my back to the concrete base. These concrete bases, you got to remember too, had steel rebar sticking up out of the concrete. And, at different heights, 6 inches, a foot, in that range. And they hadn't been cut off to level with the concrete yet. So with my back to the ditch, and the ditch is only a couple of feet wide, I lifted one of the steel girders, and another laborer that I was working with, I guess, thought that I was going to move the material. So he went down to the other end of the steel girder and lifted the other end. When he did that, immediately the ground underneath my heels broke. And I started to fall backwards with this steel girder across my waist. And if I would have fell straight back, I would have crossed the ditch, landed on the concrete base, and probably been impaled by the rebar that was sticking up out of the concrete. So I had to make a split-second decision in my mind. And what I did was I threw the steel girder away from me. I did a full twist like an athlete jumping over a high bar, and landed on my back in the ditch. I didn't think there was anything wrong, except for my pride was hurt, and then I was a little bit humiliated, but I thought it was fine. But everybody started laughing, like I did this on purpose or something. And because nobody saw the dirt break underneath my heels, nobody saw that I was falling backwards. And if I would have fallen backwards, like I said, I probably would have been impaled, and this steel girder would have landed right on top of me. So by doing what I did, I think I saved myself from maybe dying that day, but I did do something to my back. I noticed it when I went to get up out of the ditch, that there was a sharp pain, but I didn't show or tell anybody because I was so pissed off. I just got up because everybody was laughing at me. I just walked out of the mill and went to the lunch shack, and I lied down on a hard wooden bench where we eat our lunches. About 2 hours later, the foreman came in to check on me, and he said, "Are you live?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm going to the hospital." And this was the only good thing that he did, was he said, "If you're going to the," no, I told him I was going home. And he said, "Well, if you're going home, go to the hospital." And now we had an ambulance right on the site, and we had safety reps with the union. That's all their job was safety on the job. It was their job to take somebody to the hospital if somebody was injured. I had gotten a ride to work that day with a friend of mine who was working with me. He was a neighbor, and we went to work in his truck. So they only drove me to the gate where we punched in. I had to borrow my friend's truck, drive to my house, which was 2 blocks from his house. I left. I walked from his house to my house, jumped in my car, and I went to the emergency. That was my first accident. I was off work for maybe a year and a half with no compensation. I got compensation for the first 4 months, and I was cut off. So after a year and a half, I had no money, and I had to go back to work. So even though I was eating 12 Tylenol 3 every day, I had 3 in the morning, I had 3 at lunch, 3 at dinner, and 3 at bedtime. I had to have my doctor write a letter that I was okay to go back to work, because I was going to lose my house. So what ended up happening, I'm on the new job at the big expansion at Bombardier at the time.
Yeah, I just called you, but I missed it.
And we're tearing off the roof, and the roof was constructed of these big 2x6, like they're like 16-foot 2x6, and they're full of nails, big long 6-inch nails. And as we're tearing this roof off, we're just throwing everything into a big pile on the roof, and it's all mixed lumber, all with nails sticking out of it, and the nails weren't bent over or anything. So after we had this huge pile on the roof, we had to remove it from the roof, and the only way to get that lumber off was to stack it. So there was no way to pull boards off of the pile. We literally had to climb up the pile, and take from the top and then carry them down and then put them into a sling and then sling them off the roof. Well, while I was coming off the pile with a big 2x6 16-footer in my hands, my winter safety boots, a big nail went through the bottom of my boot and out the side, and it hooked my foot. So as I went to step off the pile, I realized, oh, I was caught, and it was windy, and I got blown off the pile. And the pile was probably 8 to 10 feet high, and I landed on my back, and this board came down and crashed across both my legs and left huge bruises on both of my legs. That's how hard the board hit me in the legs. Well, after that, I thought, well, I'm never going to be doing construction again because I'm already eating 12 T3s a day, and I've got 2 back injuries. So I got compensation for 1 week, and I thought, okay, it was just before Christmas. I hurt myself at the end of October. Well, that was the only check I got. I had to borrow $200 on Christmas Eve off my youngest sister, who since passed away, Valerie, so I could buy my kids something for Christmas that Christmas Eve. So on Christmas Eve, I borrowed $200 off her, and she was on welfare. That's how bad things were for me. It took 4 months for the company to figure out that I had not returned to work, even though I called them immediately, and I called the WSIB and told them that I was not working. They took 4 months to pay me. They back paid me the 4 months, and they cut me off. And so from February of '94 to the summer of 2000, when I walked into their office and demanded answers, I didn't have any money, and my life was totally destroyed.
So what effect did the injury have on your life, setting aside the money piece? What effect did it have on your family and your life in general?
Well, the day that I got reinstated in compensation in the summer of 2000, that day I asked my wife for custody of our newborn son because I couldn't afford. She had 4 kids and I had 3, and I didn't have custody of my children. She had custody of her children. Only 2 of them were living with us. 2 of them were grown up and not living with us. So she had 2 children full time. I had 3 children that came every weekend, and I couldn't afford to support us. And the rent was $1,000 a month, and I couldn't afford to support us. I didn't have any income. So that day, before I went to the compensation office and demanded answers, I asked my wife for custody of our son so that I could move out and go on welfare. And I was suicidal at that point. I had a plan to kill myself, and I was going to go on the highway and just drive myself right into a transport truck, and that was my plan. But before I did that, I went down to the WSIB, and the reason this was happening was I was working with the worker advisor for the last 10 years, and I wasn't getting any money. I was getting $110 a month, and they asked me if I wanted to get that until I was 65, or if I wanted it as a lump sum. And I took it as a lump sum. It was a lot less than if I would have taken it till I was 65. It was about $10,000 or just over $10,000, but that was 10 months rent. So I had taken it, and of course that didn't last long, and the money was all gone, and I was broke and I had no income, and so I had gone to the worker advisor to do an appeal, and they told me I needed a current letter from my doctor. So what I had done is I went to my doctor and I told my doctor, listen, I need a current letter from you stating that, I can't work. He wrote the letter. I hand delivered that letter to the compensation office. And I waited a whole month because I wanted to make sure that it was in my file before I asked for my whole file, which was couriered to me from the WSIB. And I took that file without even opening it because it was a big box. It was probably about 20 or 30 pounds of correspondence between WSIB, me, and the OWA or WA. And I hand delivered that box to the WA, the workers' advisor. Well, the day that I asked my wife for custody of our son was the next day when that file came back to me with a letter from the worker advisor saying they couldn't help me. So 10 years after losing everything, here was the worker advisor who was basically the only hope I had, telling me they couldn't help me. And it was because this letter that I had requested from my doctor that I had made sure was in that file when that I hand delivered to the WSIB was not there. They had not included that letter when I requested my file. For some reason, I don't know why. So that file came back to me by courier the very next day after I hand delivered it to the worker advisor. And that's what made me suicidal. I had nothing left at that point. I had lost my home. I had lost a rental property I had lost a business, a towing business that I was building. And I was penniless and homeless.
So where are you now? I mean, you obviously didn't commit suicide.
No, I didn't. That day, like I said, when I asked my wife for custody of our son, and I went down to the WSIB office, and I walked in there, and I thought, what have I got to lose? And I said, I want to speak to my adjudicator. And I remember her name all these years later, Linda Lamartin. And I said, I want to see her. And she came out, and we sat in a little office in the front there, and there was a security guard sitting there outside the office. And she said to me, well, you were retrained. And my mental state at that point was very fragile. And I would say I was very unstable at that point. And I literally thought that I had gone through some sort of retraining that I had no recollection of. Because she said, here's my adjudicator telling me that I was retrained. And I'm going, well, I don't recollect any retraining. I have no recollection of this. How many years of retraining did I get in, and what did I become? And she left the office and she went in the back again, and she came back out, and she started babbling about being reinstated and that I was going to get a check for 1 week or 1 day. Yeah, it was 1 day. I was going to get a check for 1 day. That's all I heard was I'm going to get a check for 1 day. And I can't even tell you the things that went through my mind at that point. I won't even say what I was thinking. But she must have seen it on my face, because right away she started backpedaling and trying to explain herself, and that the pay period, the way the pay periods were, that because of the dates, I would receive a check for 1 day, and then I would receive the next check after 2 weeks, and I would receive checks every 2 weeks after that. So I'm sitting there, and she's telling me that I'm going to get paid, and I've been going 10 years without pay, and I've lost everything I own, and the worker advisor is not going to help me, and I don't even know what's going on anymore. I'm like losing my mind. It's like, I don't even know what you're trying to tell me here. I couldn't accept that I was being reinstated, and I didn't understand why it hadn't happened before this point, and why was it happening all of a sudden now, just by me coming into the office and asking. And I was reinstated from that day. And I waited. I got the check for one day, and I waited till a check came for the full 2 weeks. And I took that check and I went right to a law firm. And I said, listen, I want to go after the compensation. They owe me 10 years back pay. And of course, that's another story. I got screwed by the lawyer, of course, but we won't get into that.
Well, thanks. So it's been a long, hard trip. Can you tell me if you had a chance to make change at WSIB, what change after your experience would you like to see at WSIB?
I think first and foremost, there's a ton of things that need to be changed. But first and foremost, I think, is they need to pay people their benefits while they sort out their issues. Don't leave injured workers hanging with no means to earn an income and not provide an income. You know, they leave you destitute, and everything just gets worse after that. You know, if I need to take tests, if I need to recuperate, if I need physio, if I need an MRI, whatever, you know, don't not pay me while you're doing all this stuff. Compensate me, and then when we figure it all out, you know, you can cut me off or whatever if I don't qualify or whatever. But don't not pay me, and then wait till it's figured out. You need to compensate people when they're injured on the job, first and foremost, so they don't lose their homes, they don't lose their families, and they don't lose their sanity.
Well, thank you very much for taking. I know it's hard to relive this, and I thank you very much for your story.
You're quite welcome. Thank you for interviewing me.